We are the Guinea Pig Collective. All will be assimilated. Resistance is futile.
Hey everybody, what's going on, and welcome back to another Toys from the Past. So on today's Toys from the Past, we will be talking about Hasbro's G.I. Joe.
G.I. Joe, G.I. Joe, fighting man from head to toe, on the land, on the sea, in the air.
Now, the original idea for the action figure that would become G.I. Joe was developed in 1963 by Stan Weston, a Manhattan licensing agent. Weston made rudimentary prototypes of the figure and basic marketing materials that showed the sales potential of a military action figure. When he showed these materials to Donald Levine, a Hasbro executive, Levine told Weston, "You will make a fortune with these." Weston subsequently licensed the entire concept to Hasbro for $100,000. So beginning in 1964, Hasbro began to produce, market, and sell the G.I. Joe line. Initially, there were only 4 figures: a sailor, a soldier, a marine, and a pilot, each representing one of the 4 branches of the military, which was the Navy, the Army, the Marines, and the Air Force. The Hasbro prototypes were originally named Rocky for the Marine/Soldier, Skip for the Sailor, and Ace for the Pilot, before the more universal name G.I. Joe was adopted. And in 1965, an African-American figure was introduced into the line. Aside from the obvious trademarking on the right buttock, other aspects of the figure were copyrighted, features that allowed Hasbro to successfully pursue cases against producers of cheap imitations, since the human figure itself cannot be copyrighted or trademarked. The scar on the right cheek was one of these. It was unintentional at first. Well, it was the placement of the right thumbnail on the underside of the thumb. By the late 60s, in the wake of the Vietnam War, Hasbro sought to downplay the war theme that had initially defined G.I. Joe. The line became known as The Adventures of G.I. Joe in 1970. Hasbro settled on the name Adventure Team. The 12-inch figure had found some success overseas, being licensed out to English Palitoy under the Action Man name, as well as many other companies throughout the world, including Takara of Japan, who would later turn it into Henshin Cyborg. But by 1976, the 12-inch figure had lost steam and relevancy, and the line was canceled. However, Hasbro did use the original molds of the G.I. Joe line to create G.I. Joe style figures called the Defenders. Now, of course, the international market continued on through '84 under many various different names. Sometimes the figures actually became football players or other figures based on different types of sports. Now, as mentioned earlier, Takara had licensed off the original G.I. Joe 12-inch figures and had found some success, but unfortunately, the kids of Japan were not really interested so much into war toys. So Takara had taken these figures and they had changed them. They made translucent plastic with metallic looking innards, and they created the Henshin Cyborg. Now, this was in 1972. Now, less than 2 years later, there was an oil crisis. Takara had looked for ways to actually shrink these figures down because the original figures were actually costing too much to produce, and nobody really had the money to pay that much extra for these big giant figures with all their extra attachments. So in 1974, the Microman version of the Henshin Cyborg was created, and it found great success. Now, even though they kept the Henshin Cyborg line on for another year, it was phased out due to not only the popularity of the Microman series, but obviously the extra cost involved in making such a large figure. So after the G.I. Joe line was sitting on the shelf for quite some time, in 1982, they successfully relaunched G.I. Joe. Now, this was after the Star Wars toy craze with the 3.75-inch figures. And let's not forget the Microman series with all the articulation that those figures have. And it's kind of funny that Hasbro had licensed off G.I. Joe to Takara, and then in turn, they wind up creating a character and a toy line very similar to the Microman that Takara had created off the backs of the G.I. Joe figures. And to get this line running very smoothly and to make sure it was successful, they employed for the first time their 3-point marketing strategy, which included not only a comic, a TV show, but traditional ads and marketing.
He'll fight for freedom wherever there's trouble. G.I. Joe is there.
It's here, the G.I. Joe collection. Infantry trooper, codename Grunt. Bazooka soldier, codename Zap. Mortar soldier, codename Short Fuse. Laser rifle trooper, codename Flash. Ranger, codename Stalker. Communications officer, codename Breaker. Machine gunner, codename Rock and Roll. Counterintelligence, codename Scarlet. Commando, codename Snake Eyes. Each sold separately. G.I. Joe from Hasbro.
He'll fight for freedom wherever there's trouble. G.I. Joe is there.
Each sold separately. The G.I. Joe motorized battle tank.
And of course, with the much smaller figures, it became possible to create many different vehicles and other assorted play sets. With the larger figures, just was not possible. But unfortunately, much like the earlier 12-inch line, the 3.75-inch line was canceled at the end of 1994. Comically, this actually coincided with the 30th anniversary of the G.I. Joe line, and accordingly, Hasbro released a 12-inch figure based on the original Action Team from 1964. From 1997 to 1998, Toys R Us had exclusive Stars and Stripes Forever figures that it released throughout its stores. Now, the select assortment of figures from the Real American Hero line were released in 1997 to celebrate its 15th anniversary, and the second assortment followed the next year in 1998. So in 2000, Hasbro re-released a selection of 3.75-inch G.I. Joe figures and vehicles. This line only lasted until 2002. The figures were sold in packs of 2 and consisted of repainted versions of figures from the Real American Hero line. Now, some of these repainted figures were assigned new identities. For example, the Baroness figure was repainted and sold as a new character called Chameleon, described on the packaging as the illegitimate half-sister of Baroness. Beginning in 2002, newly designed collections of 3.75-inch G.I. Joe figures and vehicles were released. Each collection centered on a storyline or theme such as Spy Troops and Valor vs. Venom. The line was actually put on hiatus in 2005 prior to the release of the Sigma 6 toy line. But from 2005 to 2006, the direct-to-consumer 3.75-inch line was reintroduced after this very brief hiatus via Hasbro's direct-to-consumer website, HasbroToyShop.com, and various online retailers. As a result of the line's success, some figures also became available at certain retailers such as Toys R Us. In 2007, to commemorate the 25th anniversary of the Real American Hero line, Hasbro released a collection of newly sculpted 4-inch figures as opposed to the 3.75-inch, based on classic and new designs of many of the line's best known and most popular characters. The 25th anniversary figures replaced the classic O-ring construction with a swivel chest feature and increased points of articulation beyond the standard shoulder, elbow, and knees to swivel wrists, ankles, and double-hinged knees. The 25th anniversary figures also included Specialist Tracker, otherwise known as Matt Tracker, the leader of Mask. Originally planned to consist of only 2 sets of 5 figures each, 1 G.I. Joe and 1 Cobra, the 25th anniversary collection was well received by retailers and collectors and was expanded by Hasbro into a full-fledged toy line that ran through to 2009. The most recent releases in this line do not include the 25th anniversary branding, but in all other respects, constitute a continuation of the 25th anniversary collection. Other waves released in 2009 include the Resolute figures, which were introduced in Wave 13 and had an animated feature premiere in April 2009. The 25th anniversary line was later canceled in favor of releasing figures for the upcoming live-action movie. Some of the planned figures from canceled waves, totaling 14 figures, were instead released as two 7-figure exclusive packs, entitled Defense of Cobra Island and Attack on Cobra Island. Each set contained figures from one opposing side. The canceled future waves included Night Force Falcon, the Python Patrol Trooper, and Televiper, and an Iron Claw Resolute Crimson Guard Trooper comic pack. So in 2009, a series of figures were released based on the Rise of Cobra movie. In 2010 to 2011, they released a line called The Pursuit of Cobra, which were based on 4 battlegrounds: Desert City, Jungle, and Arctic. The packaging was an update to the 25th anniversary line. For its 30th anniversary in 2011-2012, a new series of figures was released, including characters from both G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, and the G.I. Joe Renegades cartoon series. The series was continued through 2012. And in 2013, a series of figures were based on the movie G.I. Joe Retaliation. And in 2014 to 2016, to celebrate their 50th anniversary of G.I. Joe, a new line of figures was released using characters from the G.I. Joe A Real American Hero cartoon series. With all the reiterations of G.I. Joe line, I'm sure it will be no time before they wind up re-emerging once again. After all, G.I. Joe was such a popular toy line that G.I. Joe was inducted into the National Toy Hall of Fame at the Strong in Rochester, New York in 2004, and in 2017 into the Pop Culture Hall of Fame. Anyway, guys, that is all I have on this one. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Did you have G.I. Joes when you were a kid? Do you remember these older toy lines from way back when? And of course, as always, if you've enjoyed yourself, go ahead and destroy that like button for me. And if you are new to the channel and you like what you've heard and seen so far, go ahead and subscribe. I would appreciate it. And I can never state enough times how much I appreciate each and every one of you that show up for these videos. Thank you so much. I enjoy interacting with each and every one of you, and I do really appreciate the time that you spend here. And I will catch you all next time. Later, y'all.